Nikola Tesla, the inventor of AC electricity that we use today, was born on July 10th in 1856 in Croatia, which was back then part of the Austrian Empire. So the night he was born, there was a lot of uh, lightning, thunderstorm, heavy rains, and the weather was very violent. So that night, the midwife told Nikola Tesla's mom that, this is a bad omen, and the kid you've given birth to will be a kid of darkness. But in a joking way, his mother said that no, he will be uh, a child of lighting, not knowing that the future of lighting will resonate with the new boy that had been born. Nikola Tesla's father was a very strict Serbian Orthodox priest, and he also wanted his child to become a priest. But uh, Tesla's preferences were elsewhere. He wanted to do engineering work, and most researchers say that he was inspired by his mother, who was also a household wife. He did some inventions at home, like mechanical components and so on. So this always inspired Tesla. He was a great fan of Mark Twain, that famous American writer. And one of the books Nikola Tesla enjoyed was The Adventures of Huckleberry Finn. For those who read the book, that was one of the books Nikola Tesla enjoyed reading. In September 1875, Nikola Tesla gets a scholarship to study at a polytechnic in Graz, and he had enrolled for electrical engineering. He was a very bright student who loved physics and math, and in one of the physics lectures, he was interested in a dynamo, and this dynamo gave him love for studying more about alternating current. But one downside of Tesla was the gambling habit. He went into gambling and eventually lost his scholarship and dropped out of school. So when he dropped out of the polytechnic, he went and enrolled at the University of Prague, but he also never completed the degree. There is no record of him completing any kind of. So after failing at his education, uh, he went out to the world, start looking for odd engineering jobs here and there. And this is where he goes to Paris and lands a gig at one of Thomas Edison's company that was operating in Paris. Thomas Edison is this guy who invented the first uh, bulb. Tesla works for the Edison Continental Company in Paris for a while, and he was doing the work of fixing DC systems, writing solutions, and so on. Due to his great work, uh, his boss referred him to uh, go to USA. He got a recommendation letter, and later in 1884, boarded a ship. He had the few pennies in his pocket and the recommendation letter, and set off for New York, where he would go and work for Thomas Edison's main company in Manhattan. So in USA, Nikola Tesla works for Thomas Edison's company, and basically is improving their DC generators and DC systems and so on. Thomas Edison was a very rich guy who, in his vision, wanted electric current to take a lead. But Tesla was the guy who believed that AC would supersede DC. Because one of the shortcomings of DC by that time was that you could not transfer DC over long distances. But Tesla believed that AC could work and could be transmitted over very long distances. So there were a lot of wrangles between Tesla and DC, and eventually Tesla did leave Edison's company. Researchers say that one of the reasons Tesla left was he wasn't paid for some of the work he was done and so on. So when Tesla leaves Edison's company, he partners with George Westinghouse. Westinghouse was also a very rich man who had seen that Tesla's vision in SC was something that he could do invest in. So Westinghouse invests in Tesla, and they both work in on improving SC systems. So this is where we had a full-blown war, which people call the war of parents. So by then, Westinghouse and Tesla had teamed up against Thomas Edison, and they were fighting about which is better, AC or DC. Uh, uh, Westinghouse was paying Tesla some good sum of money for his invention. This war of AC and DC went on, but in the end, AC was rolled out and it seemed to work better than Thomas Edison DC. But later on, Nikola Tesla left Westinghouse. Went to do his personal work, and he did more experiments. He went and did experiments with radio technology, X-rays, wireless transmission of electricity, and so on. Very many experiments he did, and he was investing a lot of money in these experiments. Uh, Tesla's late days were so miserable. He lived his late life as a miserable loner. He lived alone. He rented a room. It was called room 3327 at the Hotel New York in New York. He used to stay in that room, live a quite simple life, and it was a very difficult situation for him. So, on the 7th day of January 1943, during the Second World War, he died, and the cause of his death was something to do with a heart attack, something like that. But uh, his body was found on the 9th day of January. That was 2 days after he had died. So that shows you how lonely and how miserable his life was. But when he died, FBI stormed his room, and they basically captured all his work, all his papers, and everything he had been doing at that time. During that time, Tesla had mentioned about something called the Mercedes, and this was a machine that had been uh, thought of to be created, and it would use radiation or particles to hit targets far away. So FBI thought that if their enemies came across this research, they would create this object and maybe defeat them in the world war. So everything was taken from Tesla's room, his personal belongings, and most of them were made to separate items. So that is how a physics icon, a man who uh, made so much uh, energy to create alternate current, died. Miserable, but his legacy still lives on up to now.